Good morning, everyone. I'm out in my garden in Eltham at the moment, so I'm getting a very nice sunshine reflection on my bald head there, which is slightly distracting. But good morning. Nice to be here and talk to everyone today. I would also like to just acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are all meeting today, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I thought I'd just speak a little bit, give you a tiny bit of background about me for context. If you all flame Damien with any questions and queries later, or indeed to tell me to be quiet, that's enough. So you'll hear that I'm British. I grew up in the countryside just outside London. Lots of dog walks by the river and holidays with my grandparents on the farm. But I suppose I was reflecting on Renew's incredible 40-year history, and I was just wondering, thinking back to what I was doing through that 40 years. And I remember in Christmas 1991, I was taking a walk with my father. I was 18. And at that time, I asked my dad what he'd wanted for me when I was a child. So this would have been when I was, 6 or 7. And he said what he'd wanted for me was safety and hope. And that the third World War that was feared would never happen. I suppose I mentioned that. I'll come back to why that's important to me later, but it's about having a hope for the future in a time of difficulty and crisis. I studied chemistry and then communications, and I worked for 25 years in mainly science and technology museums and in exhibition making and essentially in storytelling. And it's a core belief of mine that the knowledge, understanding science and technology and how it interacts with humans and the world is something that liberates us to do better, to act well, and that sharing that knowledge is a good and useful thing to do. I also, at museums, learned to think about acting in the short term, but also acting in the very long term as well. That if we aren't thinking about the very long term, then we aren't acting with that hope for the future, I guess. So I wanted to join Renew because I was inspired by the fact that it is fundamentally a organization based on facts and knowledge and understanding, and using those to take concrete action to deal with the climate emergency that we are in. It's the biggest existential threat we face as a species. Renew has been working to overcome that for 40 years, and my sense of hope, we will be trying to do that for the next 40. I also have a great appreciation for what it means to be part of a member organization, that members act, they add weight to our cause, to our advocacy, give us advice, and participate in a movement that's bigger than ourselves. So I think it's really valuable. And at this point, I feel like I should say thank you. Many of you have last week, and we've raised over $5,000 to support our work. So thank you very much for that. Obviously, at this moment, the challenges of responding to COVID-19 means that we're all working from home. I'm sure many of you are as well. I hope that you're keeping yourself safe. I hope your families are safe and well. Obviously, in this time, we have lots of cancelled events. We have lots of uncertainty. It's putting a real strain on all of us. But together we will weather the storm and continue to build a future. The climate emergency is still happening. The climate hasn't magically fixed itself in the meantime while we're all isolating. So we still have to do the things we need to do to work to building resilience and advocating for the climate emergency response that we need at the scale we need it. Damien suggested that I should mention something about my sort of vision and hopes for Renew. I suppose the first thing I'd say is that my vision is really loose at the moment, because in these first few weeks, I need to be listening to you, to the Renew team, to the experience of those who are already further along on this journey. But the kind of first thought, I suppose, that I have about the future of Renew is that we need to grow our membership. We need to become a larger movement, and that's not just around the scale of impact that we can have. It's also that we need members from the suburbs. We need members who are younger. We need to be useful and reach out and build alliances with people who are renting. And the climate emergency won't be fixed by anything other than a broad coalition across all demographics and age groups and places. The second thing I'd say is that we need to be acting in concert with others. I had a fantastic boss many years ago who said, don't ever try to win battles. Don't ever try to win a war, to win a battle. Try to build allies. If you build enough allies, then there is no war, there is no battle, because everyone's on the same page. I think that the allies we need are broadening out beyond environmental sustainability. I think that there are huge amounts that we can do in working with people involved in health and well-being, and also in social justice. There are many of the sustainable development goals are very closely allied with the work that we are doing, and we will be stronger together. The third thing is that the most important thing driving our advocacy, our credibility, our ability to act is our knowledge. So it's continuing to be a fact-based organization, building on research and analysis and evidence, and continuing to build and support that knowledge and apply that knowledge. And using a knowledge-based form of advocacy. So while our storytelling to governments, to policymakers, and so on, while our storytelling is compelling and emotive, it's always based in research evidence, and I think that's really important because that's where our credibility comes from. So in those terms, you know, I'm very inspired so far what I've seen Renew doing. For example, the work on the climate resilient homes campaign, lifting the energy performance of new homes across Australia. This is the sort of thing that I suppose I'm really keen on, that acting in the interests of really long-term change. If we can take this kind of once in a generation opportunity to improve the energy performance of newly built homes, it's going to have an impact across the nation for people for decades to come. And I think that's the kind of work I guess I'm referring to that inspires me so much. I've talked for ages. Hopefully there's some questions and comments, because that will be more interesting than just listening to me talk to a screen. Yeah, I'll stop there. I think Damien will host some questions now, but please keep them coming in the Q&A button down the bottom of the screen.
Absolutely, thanks, Paul. Great start. Yeah, please, people, post those questions on the Q&A button, and we'll start to work through them. I've got a couple initial ones here. I was going to ask you, Paul, first of all, just around your background, museums and exhibitions kind of background. Given that experience that you've had, you know, what opportunities do you see for Renew to broaden our reach and impact in engaging with both members and the broader public?
Yeah, okay. So I suppose people have lots of different views and opinions on museums, and museums are far from perfect, but at their best, they are based upon, and the things that I've worked on are based upon knowledge and information, high quality research, whether that be into history, technology, species loss and biodiversity, all of those things are, you know, key activities of museum research. And that but the storytelling that happens is based on a couple of things. It's based on helping people understand things, but it's also based on helping people take action and take concrete action, arming people for concrete action. And it's done in a way that is trying to reach across a range of age groups, a range of demographics. It's also that museums have are organizations that are fundamentally about service, and they're serving an audience, they're serving a need. They have a very clear sense of what they're for, why they're acting in the way they are. And I think that's really important to bear in mind. You know, we are trying to support the Australian resilience in the face of a climate emergency. And that's a common goal we need to articulate and share. And I think that's something I'd want to bring from museums. Museums are also usually have really rich and valued members and volunteers, and work in concert with broad alliances. So I see a lot of similarity there as well.
Great, thank you. Got a couple of questions feeding in through here. So this is from Chris. I think Chris is from our Byron, Zero Byron community group up there. To what extent will Renew continue the great coverage of renewable energy growth and technology in Australia?
I think that Renew does essential work in communicating that information, and I think that's one of the ways in which Renew has an impact both to its members and to the wider readership that Renew has. I think that it's essential that Renew maintains this kind of coverage. Yeah, quite straightforward answer, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can't imagine it not being a focus. Here's a different one, a bit more specific from Don. Do you believe it will be worth forming a relationship connecting with Passive House Australia?
I think it's worth building relationships with everybody. I think the broader the coalition, the better. So yes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Renew does have a relationship to some extent through the magazines and through some of the, I suppose, the case studies and showcasing some of those homes. And I mean, the Passive House movement is pretty amazing across Australia. So to strengthen those connections would be great. One from Kath here. I really like the idea of building allies and wonder how this connects with, or perhaps disconnects with, the aim of increasing membership. We have a sense from COVID of how we can connect without being members. To ask it another way, if Renew had all the money it needed, would it need more members? You may have been partially answering this question. That's a bit more of a longer one.
All right, so the first thing I would say is we are extremely grateful for the financial support that we gain from our members, but that isn't the reason we're a membership organisation. We are not a membership organisation because of a financial growth need. We are primarily a members organisation because it gives us an ability to have an impact across Australia. It gives us it enables us to be part of a community who are on the same journey with us. We can learn from, and we can broker learning from each other. And also it gives us credibility. As a members organisation, we can say in lobbying governments and so on, we can say that we are acting not just from, 5 people in an office. We're acting as an organisation of 11,000 people. Who have demonstrated their commitment to the cause that we're on. So I think membership is really important for that reason. I don't think that broadening and increasing membership is different from building allies. I suppose the kind of allies that I would see us working with, probably many of those would be members organisations themselves. I think I'm just trying to understand what's behind the question in terms of how building allies holds a risk of disconnecting from increasing membership. I don't see the two as in opposition. but there's clearly something perhaps behind the question that perhaps I'm not fully understanding. So I'll ask a follow-up if I haven't kind of explained that or understood it well. That would be great.
Yeah, good. This one's from Vicky. Vicky's also from Zero Emissions Byron. In the new world we find ourselves due to COVID-19, we're looking at what the new normal will look like and how we can help build zero carbon communities. Do you have any thoughts around this?
Yeah, so I mean, less on the precise mechanisms. There are far wiser people than I already acting in that space. But I would say it gives us a political moment when a whole host of rigidities and old certainties, statements about how change is hard and can't be done and so on, those things have just crumbled down. We currently have a Liberal government who have opposed all forms of sort of big government action for many years. And yet suddenly the machinery of government can be thrown into action, money can be generated to support this time of crisis. So it demonstrates that where there is a political will and a demonstrable need, that the machinery and systems that we have is able to act. So I suppose I would draw a straight line between that principle, that the new normal is governments can act in the service of doing great things. And so I would link that back to climate resilient homes, back to our work on getting to 100% renewable grid by 2030. That these things, the kind of the responses that this is too hard, there are too many interests involved and so on, those responses become slightly less credible, I think, in an environment where we have overturned all notions of historic fiscal management in order to support the coronavirus situation. So yeah, I think there's a moment of building together what the new normal can be, and the new normal very much is not the old normal, I suppose.
Thank you. Vicky had a follow-up second part to her question
Great.
too. So yeah, also whilst lifting the energy performance of new houses is great, we have a stock of existing buildings, and so retrofits are important. What can Renew offer here? I might just say that the housing campaign is very much about both new and existing homes. And yeah, in 2050, we know that half the homes that'll exist then exist now, so they're equally important. But you might have some thoughts, Paul. And also Vicky says, welcome to Renew, and thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is where I look at renters and suburbs and so on as well. You know, how are we going to get more information out to renters? So mandatory disclosure of energy performance, for example, getting standards introduced in states as new higher quality minimal standards for environmental performance for new homes. Again, it's part of that kind of steady bureaucratic change that happens over a long period of time, to just say we need to just raise the standards over time. And I think that's part of us being of a value to a broad audience. It's renters as well as homeowners. It's people who are unable to implement large scale passive house builds or what have you. Everyone has a role to play. How can we help people who are renting to do those 3 or 4 small things that they might be able to do themselves that could help? But mostly, how do we improve the regulations and disclosure so that renters are able to make choices, and it forces a commercial pressure on landlords to up their game and improve their properties.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a couple of questions coming in around renters in particular. So I think what you've just sort of said there goes to some of those questions, which is good. One here from Bill, which might be in a similar context, but do we have a figure of merit to allow houses to be built or sold with this figure quoted? I assume that might be something around mandatory disclosure, which is very much what we're advocating for from a policy perspective. We want all existing homes to be rated and people to know, renters or new owner occupiers, that those the energy performance of those homes, and then the performance itself to actually be lifted over time. Not sure if you have any other thoughts on that front, Paul.
Well, I'd only say that there's, areas now where, again, this was thought impossible by manufacturers many years ago, to get energy ratings on your fridge or your dishwasher, and washing machines. That's now just normal. There are stickers in the shop. For me, it's not just, it's about making that the new normal. So that people can see that there is so that they're empowered, and that people who have, properties that have really poor energy performance, that's visible and known and understood, and it becomes something that, one of the observations I would have about Australia is that Australia is really good at moving together as a social group. When we all get together and agree on things and they become a social norm, we're all really good at raising our game to meet that. And I think it's around, part of this is the soft side of it, is creating a new social norm for landlords and property agents and so on, where it's part of the conversation just as much as security or privacy or anything like that.
Absolutely. Comment from Bert. I think Renew is a great organisation. To increase membership, it would seem that's the main issue in terms of getting the word around. I think that's quite a good point. To take a bit of a different tact, just because we've been talking a bit about COVID-19, how can we get climate change action to be a key part of the recovery stage from COVID-19, and what can Renew and its members do?
Great question. I would say that in addition to it being a sort of moment for a new normal and a new type of conversation, I would say that the impacts on the economy across Australia are going to be huge, and there is going to be some effort in Australia and worldwide to rebuild and reshape that economy. I think there are a couple of things in there. There's how do we re-engineer the economy to be more circular, more local, and so on. But there is also, how do we draw new technologies, new investment into the energy systems of the future, the building systems of the future. So where, ordinarily there'd be a sort of reinvestment into existing industries, instead of reinvesting in the existing stuff that we know isn't right for the future, let's invest in the new stuff. So where are those innovative startups for different approaches? How do we kickstart the economy by building the infrastructure needed to broaden electric vehicles, for example? Electric vehicle use, I should say, not broaden the vehicles, they still have to fit on the road. What can we, how can we make that case to government in the rebuilding process? And there are already conversations about how the economy gets rebuilt in the future, which is great. We have a huge pool of talent in Australia ready to do this. So it's a question of just joining up all of the policy, the finances, and so on, in such a way that can be enabled. How can members help? I think that's things that we'll be talking about in Renew and in member communications. I think it's about talking with your peer groups, your friends, your family, and keeping the kind of stories alive of what we can do. And there are more prosaic things, as has already been talked about. The Renew is a key way of getting the word out as a magazine. You can give people a subscription or a membership as a gift, and that's a way of reaching a new audience and helping support our work. If you are able to do that for someone, that would be amazing. They'll be looking for reading material during this shutdown period. And we also have the prize draw going on at the moment, which closes on the 17th. Anyone who is a member on that date will be in with a chance to win a sand and hot water heat pump worth $5,000. So I urge you to do those small scale actions as well. But the most important things are going to be to participate and maintain that conversation about the possibilities of a different future, as opposed, and just keep challenging people. We can all do more, and the more people are talking about doing more, the more will get done, and that will all start to snowball.
Yeah, great. Bit more specific one here. This is from Stuart. To what extent can Renew support and advocate for a small community who wishes to pursue a small-scale renewable energy project?
I would hope that we can support. I don't quite know how. We need more, perhaps more information, more details, but do get in touch and we can talk about that for sure.
Yeah, I can probably help a bit with that one. I mean, we do help lots of individual projects with, background work, feasibility, some analysis, some project scoping kind of work. In the end, Renew typically doesn't install sort of systems, but we can kind of help with those early phases of scoping it and perhaps procurement, selecting suppliers and that kind of thing. And from an advocacy point of view, obviously, we're trying to advocate for better, stronger policies to make those kind of systems easy to connect to the grid and easier to set up. Now do we have any data on how the COVID-19 lockdowns are affecting international as well as national emissions during this health crisis? Not sure if you've been looking at that, Paul, specifically.
I am by no means a deep enough expert to be able to answer that question. I'm sure there have been shifts in impacts, but I don't have any data. Damien, you might have something to add there.
Yeah, look, I've seen some, but we haven't been focusing on it specifically in our projects, but I've seen some just through reading the general news and some other data that emissions, air quality has actually improved a bit. Of course, the interesting thing is going to be what actually happens to household energy use and emissions now over the next couple of months with people working from home, and also energy bills. Renew and lots of other organisations are trying to put some information out there to help people and sort of make them a bit more aware of what might happen when we're unfortunately kind of running heating systems and other things a bit more regularly now that we're all at home. Now here's a fairly long one from Simon, who's a previous board member of ours. So if you give me a couple of minutes here, we'll go through this one. Paul, as a recently retired Renew board member, I convey a warm welcome to you as our new CEO. Speaking to you today from my outback sheep station north of Broken Hill, my question relates to regional and remote Australia. In my capacity as head of Landcare Broken Hill, we launched 12 months ago a holistic program of 39 interconnected environmental projects under the banner of Greening the Hill Mark II. This initiative includes a diversity of sustainability projects. I believe there is a very great need for Renew to offer its expertise and programs to regional and remote Australia. People living in such regions are in great need of support to embrace more sustainable and self-sufficient modes of living, yet being remote from the capital cities and can't participate in Renew programs largely offered to the members based in urban Australia. Would you be interested in exploring ways by which Renew might improve its reach to remote and regional Australia?
Yes, very much so. Your project sounds great and I would love to hear more. That sounds an amazing thing that you're doing up there, and I love the fact that you're doing it, from the sounds of it, you're doing it at scale and speed. So that just sounds amazing. Love to hear more. We have accelerated the moves that were underway to try and bring more of our events online. So we're moving our speed date events online for meeting a sustainability expert first for Casey on the 31st of May and Randwick on the 6th of June. Registrations for Casey are open and Randwick will be soon. But that sort of thing is, and events like we're doing now, we are learning how to better use the technology that we have to be able to engage in events and improve our outreach into regional and remote areas. We are no doubt population density and so on does lead to a natural focus in on the cities, but that is a barrier that we can overcome partly with technology and partly with a spirit of commitment. I would say it's really important, and I'd say it's also really important to find the right balance with supporting the many people who live in the cities, and also need to contribute to supporting the sustainable Australia of the future. So we have to find the right balance, but I hope that as we are developing our capacity in webinars and other forms of outreach digitally, that we are able to be more supportive in this regard, for sure.
Great. Now this next one's from Helen Millicer, who's actually most recent previous board president. Hi Helen, how are you going? Helen says, hi Paul and Renew team, very pleased to welcome you to Renew. What are your thoughts on strategic shifts and increasing profile for Renew and its activities? Sustainable House Day is a major event and investment, and there are many other outreach activities. What are your thoughts on the potential and ROI of Renew with its programs?
It's far too beautiful and sunny a day in Eltham to get into finances at the moment, and I haven't dug in enough to that already to be able to give really cogent answers. What I would say is that there are opportunities with building alliances that I think are really important in terms of broadening our fundraising base. I would say that there are areas where our expertise is extremely highly valued and is valued both on a political and on a commercial level, and I think there's room for growth there. I suppose I would say that the broadening of the member base is also a key here as well. I think that we are amazing with 11,000 members. How much more amazing we'll be when we hit 50,000. What does it take to get there? It takes time, it takes communication and advocacy based on our core values and purpose, and it takes a commitment to be a member organisation that serves its members well. So I think all of those things are really important. I would say that the 40-year history that Renew has and that you've been a part of are giving a lot of pointers to that in terms of long-term commitment. Sustainable House Day is, as you quite rightly say, is an amazing highlight of Renew's year every year. We will most certainly be going ahead with Sustainable House Day this year, though there is a lot of uncertainty around how. So we are planning full on for the 20th of September, but of course we're planning contingencies to move to perhaps November if that becomes necessary, or our final fallback is to do some form of virtual tours and digital engagement so that we can maintain momentum, maintain reputation, and maintain those connections and support for people who are opening their minds and developing their thoughts on living more sustainably in their homes. We don't know yet. We're having to live through this COVID time. So I can't give a clear answer yet on how precisely that will work, but we're full steam ahead to make Sustainable House Day yet another success, and make sure we have continuity through to next year and the years beyond. That's quite a rambling answer to what was quite a cogent question. Do bash in a quick follow-up if there's anything that I didn't cover fully there. Thanks.
Thank you. Another specific one. Do you expect there will be a big drop in solar panel installations? What can we do to maintain the increase in installation? This is the perfect time to be using solar with so many people working from home.
I think those who've already invested and done it, I think well done. They'll be having great benefit, and on a day like today, for sure, in Victoria. I don't know the details of how the industry is able to respond to the current situation. What I do know is people are tightening their belts and will be nervous about investment. I also know that above all else, we have to put the safety of installers at the forefront of our mind. We put out a news story on the 3rd of April around installing through the pandemic. and that highlights that there is work that can be done remotely on developing the initial kind of assessments and so on. Sometimes when the switchboard is outdoors, that's possible. If it's indoors, it's harder. So perhaps the key thing here is everyone's different. It's case by case. I would say in terms of the overall advocacy of the importance, I would say that work still continues. And if people need to defer their plans because of their financial position or what have you, then we need to push ourselves forward to do that, and perhaps people can plan to do the work next year. Yeah, I think we'll do as always in a time like this. Our health and well-being has to come first in the short term, and we do what we can to make plans for the long term. Yeah, but have a look at the article. I think yeah, Doug has just shared that across to all attendees, and that's on our website.
Yeah, and I can probably just add to that question as well. Not so much in the context of COVID, but our focus is very much on how to get more solar, particularly rooftop household solar, but more renewable energy into our grids. There are in some parts of the network we are got such high levels of rooftop solar now that there are some technical issues that are going on. We've been working on a study, and there'll be a stage 2 of this in the second part of the year, which looks at how can we invest more optimally in our electricity grids to allow us to go from what is really sort of 20 to 30% penetration of households with solar now up and beyond 50% and up to 70 and 80%. How can that be done? And we're very much sort of focused on that. Doug also had some interesting stats just on sort of partly related to that and related to the emissions questions earlier. Electricity demand overall is down 6 to 11%, which is mainly because commercial businesses, I think, are unfortunately closing. But there's been a 20% increase in residential usage recently, and particularly with a weekend pattern for weekdays instead of peaks, instead of the duck curve. So some interesting stats there. We had a follow-up from Helen, which is, you talk of allies. This is great. Does this mean that Renew is going to engage with other groups such as professional associations, community groups, councils, or the like? Will this be around Renew's existing activities or new partnership ventures? Interested in your experience and thoughts on priorities here.
So really early days for developing this thinking. I would say that I'm not entirely sure yet. My instincts are everyone, but of course it's about capacity and where the most benefit is. In my experience, the best partnerships are ones that come where each party has something unique and different to offer, but the overall goal and way of working contains trust and a shared goal. So I would say that there are particular councils across Australia we're already working with that we want to magnify, and there are yeah, as well as new ones to find. I think that the challenge of who and how, we need to be careful of not dissipating our effort, not dissipating Renew's effort into too many at once and becoming too dispersed. But also we need to operate at a number of scales. It's something that I suppose I learned from museums, that operating on a number of scales simultaneously is really important. Don't push all of your activity into one or two single big things, and also don't just sort of tiptoe around lots and lots of small things, but have quite a few on the go at once. And also have having the kind of the grace and the transparency and the honesty to be able to draw some partnerships to a close if they aren't really giving mutual interest and Renew's interest in particular. So I'm in open early days with thinking about this, so I'm not sure yet, but certainly my initial thinking is that there's really useful areas to explore around health and well-being. The sort of preliminary thoughts on some of the sustainable housing work that we've done down at the Cape and so on, is that we can see that there are significant well-being benefits coming out, and we need to understand those better so we can build them into our advocacy.
Great. Comment here from Bill. I think this is in relation to the previous data around solar. Solar in my suburb is not 20%, it's more like 6%, so a long way to go. It's good to know, Bill. Might change tack a little bit and perhaps go with a bit more personal question, Paul. So some people explain our magazines as Renew Mag is being for doers with tools and DIY, and Sanctuary Mag is for dreamers. How do you see yourself? Are you a handyman or a dreamer?
It's an excellent question, and this is one of those times when whatever I say will be wrong for someone. I am. My grandfather was a farm labourer who could fix anything, up to and including combine harvesters. I learned some things from him, but I really would not say myself that I'm handy. I would tend to seek help to do most things. I'm also not much of a personal dreamer. I don't have a sense of an enormous single thing I want to achieve in my life in the way of a brand new architectural build on a new site. I suppose my commitments really come from we need dreamers and doers, and I love the fact that Renew has a view of supporting and impacting on both. We need dreamers to imagine a different future, and we need doers to help us get there. And for any kind of doing, I have a 15-year-old who's quite handy. I can rely on him for many things. And my 12-year-old is a visionary and a dreamer. So we sort of keep those distinct in the family to some extent.
Very good. How do you see free content and social media platforms playing a role in the expansion of the Renew community?
Yes, where it has value and it's delivering our mission. So I think that we have to be reaching a wider audience than members, and so we need to be pushing more out. I would say again, it's a cost-benefit analysis, and it's about how we don't just want to be contributing to noise. There's no value in just sort of shouting advocacy points from the rooftops, which some organisations on social media can descend into. I think it's about being able to support people where they are, where we are now. For example, tips for keeping warm in winter when working from home, something that we're talking about in the office as something for Renew to contribute in the future. Now, it's things like that where pushing that sort of thing out in free content is great, and pushing it out in more detail in Renew and Sanctuary is really important, and on the website is really important as well. So I suppose what I'm saying is that it's the combination and the mixture that's of value, but I'm not suggesting that all of the Renew team, that we all need to get onto TikTok immediately and start trying to outdance the 12-year-olds. I think there is we have to be a bit more strategic than that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got about 10 minutes left, so yeah, please feel free to post some more questions and we'll try and get through 2 or 3 more. Just a general one, Paul. Were you aware of Renew much before you took on the role, but before sort of a few months ago? And if so, what were your impressions of the organisation from an outsider's perspective?
My first encounter, now it's really bugging me that I can't recall which one it was. It was either at Ceres or it was at Edendale, just down the road from me in Victoria. One of the community festivals at some point. There was a group who had Renew and Sanctuary magazines on a table with a cloth, you know. So I first encountered the organization in that kind of social context, which I really appreciated. I've got friends down the road who are subscribers, members and subscribers to Sanctuary. So, you know, the magazine has been on the coffee table when we go around for dinner, that sort of thing. So that's really, really useful. Oh, I've just got a message here from Doug that says Robin Garden from the Melbourne branch was probably at the table. It was probably the Nillumbik Festival. It could well be. That sounds highly plausible. So I should say hello to Robin and thank you for the moment of inspiration there with the magazines, and I'm sure a fetching blue shirt. So they were my first encounters. My impression of the organisation from outside, I suppose, was there is something in that dreamers and doers sense that I really like. I had the sense of individuals who were knowledge-based and focused towards the future. That's what I liked. There was something about kind of practical applications. One of my frustrations, I suppose, in the museums and arts sector in my career has been that there are many people who produce artworks that try to inspire people about climate change or reflect on climate change. What I saw in Renew was here's some applied knowledge to actually do something about it. Don't get me wrong, I think we need both, but I was attracted to knowledge-based action for sure. And then as I've got to know Renew better and begun working with the team, what I've been struck by is quite simply the depth of knowledge. Renew has an incredibly knowledgeable and thoughtful team, and so I think that's something I'm really valuing, and we need to apply for the future. Yeah,
absolutely. An important one we had from the other night actually was around young people. How do you think we can reach and engage more younger people in the organisation?
That's really interesting. So one of the things that I've been reflecting on is that among people who are already part of a social group that's based on knowledge and who are knowledge-based thinkers themselves, are very persuaded by the idea of education simply through more knowledge, more information. We have done, in my background, my master's in science communication way back. Ever since then, there's been lots of study on why haven't people responded to climate change, because the facts have been clear for a long time. And part of the reason is that there is a huge resistance to taking on new information. It's a cognitive bias that's hardwired into our brains. There is a bias against new information that conflicts with our existing social and emotional beliefs about the world. We are much better at getting information and learning from our peers in social contexts than we are from information that seems to come from outside those social contexts. So the first thing that we need to be doing to engage with young people is to be where they are and to be reflective of the environment in which they find themselves and be realistic and real. Now, we need a huge breadth of, we need a coalition of lots of different kinds of people on this network. But to the kids in my kids' high school, Sanctuary magazine and Renew magazine do not resonate at all. But the Climate Strike March is something that is a direct activist approach that really does resonate. So how are we part of the social world of young people and renters and the suburbs, as well as being part of the world of our existing members who do tend to skew towards a older demographic. It's not a critique; it's just what the demographics show. And we need to be in the social world of young people in order to be able to open and begin conversations. It's another reason why these allies are really important. How can we be part of a movement that includes where young people already are?
Okay. Well, I think we've exhausted the questions online there from the participants. Maybe we've got a few minutes left. Maybe I'll ask you a wind-up one unless anybody else wants to post one. But just given the sort of the nature of working in sustainability and climate change, as we all do, we have hope for the future and where we can go, but it's also can get a bit challenging at times. So I guess from your perspective, working in this space, do you see yourself as an optimist or a pessimist?
I am both in a way. I'm just actually looking up a quote that I am a huge fan of, just to make sure I get it right. So Rebecca Solnit, in her work Hope on the Dark, she wrote, "Hope is not a lottery ticket that you can sit on the sofa and clutch feeling lucky. It is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency." I like that because I think that sometimes we can see hope as being somehow a wishy-washy kind of thing. I see hope as an energetic and active call to build the future we want. So I see that it is the route away from despair. Having hope, finding hope in each other and in the idea of a better future is actually, to me, is the only thing that will help build that future. Despair has never built a future, ever. Only hope leads us into the future. So I'm hopeful.
That's great. Look, I think that's an excellent kind of place perhaps to end on. We have gone through the questions that the attendees had for us today. So look, thanks everybody for participating in this session, and thanks to Paul and the team for supporting as well. I know, Paul, you've got some thoughts on perhaps making this kind of engagement a bit more of a regular experience in the future. Maybe you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's really important that I'm able to be in a forum where I can listen to members and hear views. I need to make really sure that we are a national a national organisation that's serving its members nationally, and one always has the risk of being in a bubble based on where you are and who you already know. So I think we have to actively make sure we all get out of our bubble and listen to diversity of voices. So I would absolutely love to find a way to hear members more from across the country, and this feels like a really nice forum to do it. So I'm really open. Please email, let me know what you think. To do these every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, and even if that's to a small number, to find a way to listen feels to me really important. So let me know if people would like that. But also, you don't just want to be bored of hearing from me either. We have other things in our life than listening to me and getting my forehead burnt in the bright sun. So yeah, let me know what you think, but I'm really open to these conversations happening in future.
Great, thanks. And thanks everybody for attending. We might leave it there. I'm sure we'll be re-engaging in this kind of, on this level multiple times at least in the foreseeable future with the context that we're living in. But thanks very much for your attendance today. Hope it's sunny where you are and you've got a nice afternoon ahead, and we look forward to conversing with you again soon.
Great. Thank you and goodbye.